Hello, my name is Connor Cedarholm, and I'm about to graduate from UVM with a degree in Community Centered Design. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what this project is all about before you watch it. We've all spent the last 3 years and a couple months dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. On the news, we've heard about the spread of the virus, we've heard near constant debates about what the correct policy response was, and we've also heard about an ever-rising death toll. Many of us were indoors, alone, at work, or with family during that time. And what we didn't hear about much was what other regular people were going through. That's what this project aims to do. Hear people's stories about this truly exceptional time in people's lives. What follows are the stories of 8 people who lived in Chittenden County, Vermont during COVID-19. Some are students, some are working, and many of the people I talked to were living at this place called Dismas House, which is an organization based here in Burlington that helps people transition from prison back to their communities. Without further ado, here are their stories. When did you first realize that COVID was going to be a big deal?
When everything got shut down, nobody weren't going to work, and pretty much when they closed down the park, because I have 2 daughters, and at that time we usually like to go to park and places like that, and yeah, so that kind of closed everything and kind of shut that fun part down, and yeah, that's when I realized that it was really bad.
When I first heard about it, it wasn't clear that it was going to be a big deal because I was just hearing like stuff on the internet, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what that is. That is across seas, and that is not going to make its way over here. And then within a few days of hearing about it, it became clear that it was going to be a big deal. And then within like a few days of that, it was a big deal. There was not very much there wasn't that much lead time, I guess, or like preparation. It kind of just, I heard about it, and then it was happening, and it was, we all went home for spring break, and we did not come back because it was not safe.
I remember there was a story where there was a cruise ship. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking
Stuck
about.
in the ocean, and like they couldn't, like no one could get off it, and they had to be like quarantined on that cruise ship. And that's when I first remember, like, okay, so this is serious. But like, never did I ever think that it would come like to North America.
I think my dad told me about it. Was like, oh my God, there's this virus in China that like, just watch, like it's gonna be here. And then I don't know. I was kind of skeptical about that at first because I don't know. Sometimes parents like will run with the news, but I think by the time I got home for spring break, I realized like, oh shit, I could be here for a while.
I was traveling for work at the time. Like, we'd been hearing about COVID in China and other places, and it was not really clear that it was going to be a big deal at all. And I travel for work every few months. I go somewhere. So I happen to be in Vancouver, Canada, and I was visiting communities that I was working with and visiting with friends in Vancouver, and the news was like going from like a steady drip to like a fire hose of like, this is gonna be bad. And everybody who I knew who was like not at home was suddenly being like, I gotta be home. And they were talking about closing borders, which meant I was gonna have to cross a border to get home. And I didn't have it nearly as bad as some people were like in much further away places in the world trying to get home.
It was kind of scary and weird at the same time. It was like, you know, because they always have like movies and like predictions about the future is not going to be so bright and all this shit. But you never think it's going to happen. And then when it started happening, it was, I don't know, it was kind of weird, like, because I couldn't even go see any of my family. Like my mom, she was all freaked out about it. She's like, don't come and visit, you know, da 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 da. So it was definitely strange and odd. There's a lot of isolation. I was probably home for a month or two without even really seeing anybody. The only time I'd leave was like to go get something to eat or something, you know.
Well, I knew because of contact with family, people, that weren't in jail. But just being in there, when it started was late 2019, pretty much. Yeah, it was months, before they really realized, okay, we're gonna do something, and things started to get locked down. Or at least where I was anyways. It was a smaller jail too, so that probably helped.
That was March, 2020? I was checking out stuff online and I saw like this virus in China that was happening beginning of the year, like January, February, and then it made it to the US. And then, then it was like, oh shit, like here comes this pandemic. And then when I got really real was when I was like laid off from my job and was like, okay, it's actually having an impact. And
the biggest stress was the idea of getting it and then infecting our elderly family members and being the one responsible for having done that. Right. So the whole time we were just like extra careful about those moments.
For many people, the hardest part of COVID-19 was the social isolation. A lot of us were disconnected from our friends, families, neighbors, and coworkers, and all of us felt that psychological toll that the isolation took on us. It affected everyone, albeit some people a little differently from others. In addition, some people were in prison when the pandemic broke out, already isolated from their families and friends. COVID imposed further restrictions on these people's abilities to interact with other folks.
Well, at that time, we couldn't go over to my kid's grandma's house. And the reason why it was COVID, everybody was scared of COVID. And at the same time, she was an elder lady, so I figured that it's better for her not to get in contact with anybody. And, everyone just kind of stuck in a home. And there were no plane or nothing like that. And, pretty much isolate everybody. And not a family could see a family. That devastated everybody. And pretty much it just took a toll on that from that on.
Well, with me, it caused me to isolate and start drinking a lot. And it just, it caused a lot of kind of chaos in my life. I started, I was home all the time, so my neighbors started getting on my nerves. And then I ended up getting in some squabbles with them because I found out they were stealing from me and all this. And this probably would have never happened if it wasn't for COVID because I wouldn't have been home so much. So I ended up, getting in all kinds of trouble because I had too much time on my hands.
at first I was like loving it because I'm an introvert. And so it's like, you tell me to stay in my house and you're going to give me free money. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I can hang out. I just get the government money, get paid to play games and get unemployment and can party and do whatever. And it was sweet. But yeah, then it got a lot harder because I got my own place. I had a roommate and then I got a new apartment. And then it was like prolonged isolation and it got really unhealthy really quick. I was using a lot of hard drugs, smoking a lot of weed, drinking a lot, looking at crazy stuff on the internet, and I kind of lost my mind. And that's where my charges came from, was like through those episodes. I don't know if you want me to keep going and explain all that, but.
You can talk to it as much as you want to.
Yeah. So like I said, I was like, would consider it like drug-induced psychosis, where I had a couple psychotic breaks, where I just totally lost touch with reality. Just like yelling at people downtown. Surprised I didn't get picked up by the cops then, and then it just kept getting worse and worse. Got really delusional, and it was like, oh, this is the end of the world. I need to buy weapons to prepare and defend myself in case anything happens. Obviously, my family was super concerned, and then I did like some graffiti downtown. I ended up busting out a window in like my delusional beliefs. Like somebody tried to like take my temperature and I was like, oh, they're trying to scan me. Like this is like the start of the end and like I have to do something. Thank God I didn't hurt anybody. I probably scared the shit out of a lot of people and I'm sorry about that and it's something I'm not proud of. So yeah. So I was going over to my dad's. with my weapons. There was police waiting for me in his driveway. They brought me to the hospital. And then from UVM, I went to Brattleboro Retreat. From Brattleboro Retreat, I went to prison. It was tough. So
Yeah.
quarantine was not easy, and I did not handle it well at all.
People, there was a lot of tension, stress. And of course, in jail, you're tight, close together. Anyways, to begin with, there's a lot of stress to begin with. So, that any added is not good. And then it changed our daily routines that everybody's used to, going to work out, going outside. We had to move in smaller groups, and then eventually became locked in, and you're out cell by cell for a while. I worked in the kitchen, so I got out. I actually volunteered to stay where I was because they turned it into a surge facility, and they kept just like cleaners, people for the kitchen. There was like 25 of us out of 200 and something people that were there to begin with. And we did. They brought a few people in, probably a dozen in the time I was there. I got out pretty quickly after it really started getting rotten, so it wasn't too bad for me.
So when I first got there, like you had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. So meaning that you were in like a single cell by yourself, isolated from everyone else. And I think you were allowed out of your cell for maybe like 30 minutes a day. And that's just to like, here's what they would let you do in that 30 minutes. You could walk up and down a hall, a very small hallway. You can pace back and forth. And they would let you take a shower, is what you could do. And then back into your cell you go. And then after like the 2-week quarantine, you get released into general population with everyone else. And really, the only thing with that was I think you just had to wear a mask. But other than that, you were free to roam whenever you wanted throughout the what do they call it? The wing, A wing. And then that was fine. Just wear a mask. That was it.
I mean, they shut everything down.
Mm-hmm.
There were no seeing a caseworker or an officer coming in trying to check or anything like that. Everything was just like, okay, stay away 6 feet. If they saw you coughing or you weren't feeling well, you get moved to isolation room and you stay there for like 2 weeks to make sure that you weren't sick. And pretty much we didn't have no rec. And also, the only time that we actually came out was to take a shower once a day. And other than that, they fed us right in the cell, and pretty much they picked up the laundries and trays, and nothing was done at all. Everything was pretty much a lockdown. Mm-hmm. So if you send a paper, they got to make sure the paper is not containing any COVID that your caseworker or officers will get sick. So it's pretty much difficult. Everything was delayed, and it was a pretty good safety precaution that they took.
For most people, COVID had a significant impact on our relationship with work, whether it was being laid off, working remotely, or affecting the day-to-day structure of our jobs. The pandemic has left no workplace untouched. Many of these changes were permanent and continue to affect our relationships with our jobs to this day.
But coming in, I didn't even know if we'd be able to search for work, all that kind of stuff. We don't really know. That was some of the stuff I might have worried about maybe, because I knew when we started hearing about this almost into 2020, and then it was still a couple months before things started getting, okay, they started locking things down. I knew I was getting out within months, and I was wondering, it should have gotten me out sooner, which it didn't, but I was wondering if it was going to hold me in longer. That was the only thing that really stressed me. But it worked out.
Yeah.
Worked out good the way it did. But well, they have a bunch of protocols before you even get to work. You had to sign in on an app if you were having any symptoms, so on and so forth. Got to work, and you don't normally just go to work and that's it. Now they had the scanner take your temperature. You had to answer some more questions there, and I think that was it. And then if you cleared it, you could clock in.
Yeah.
If not, if you didn't clear any of that, it wouldn't clock you in anyways. But, and then as far as customers, the social distancing, it's definitely different.
Yeah.
For sure. Especially when you're trying to show somebody something about a tool. You kind of need them right there. Yeah, it was.
The virus had been going on for a few months.
So that would have been the summer of 2020, right?
Yes. At that point, there was like maybe 6 people that were decided to work from the office. Like they gave everyone the choice of you can come into the office or not. And everyone was home except there was probably 6 people in the office at a given time. And half of the days I would go into the office and I would do my work there. And then half the days I would just do the work in the living room.
One thing that too often gets overlooked in our discussions about COVID is how it impacted the lives of young people. Many of the long-term effects of prolonged social isolation on a whole generation of children remain to be seen. But there's no question the pandemic has taken a radical toll on the lives of these kids. Their parents and the people who work with children have seen firsthand how COVID has begun to affect the lives of these young people.
Things have changed. Even kids, I noticed, they came back with a lot more attitude from being home for so long. The people that are in the education field, I know a teacher. She actually resigned from being a teacher because it was just so rough on her after COVID, and it affected family lives. Like people were stuck together a lot. I think the divorce rate increased or something like that because people are stuck together. I mean, I don't know. Like it did change shit. Yeah, for sure.
Coming out of that first summer and wondering whether school was going to start up again and what it was going to look like, and deciding to homeschool one of our kids because it just seemed pointless to have a 3rd grader try to be doing a virtual school world, and figuring that out, and that actually turning out to be a nice thing, like, so what some things that seem stressful turned into more joyful.
Mm-hmm. To follow up on that a little bit, so you decided to homeschool your 3rd grader. Is that still happening? Like, did you just transition fully to that?
No, in fact, we only did it for a little more than half of the school year. Like I just say we, but it was mostly Claire, did that from September through maybe January. And school was kind of like figuring themselves out on how to deliver learning virtually and manage hybrid learning and all that. And then, we transitioned him back into being in school.
Yeah, I think that there is a really drastic difference in some of their teamwork skills compared to now versus like a year ago even. Because kids, they change and develop so quickly, especially like for the younger kids, like the kindergarten, 1st graders, like they can learn things and like change their mind pretty easily. So I think when I was working with some of them before, I felt really frustrated that none of them wanted to really participate in anything, and they had a really hard time working together and had a really hard time with failure. Like they really struggled to lose at games, probably because they just didn't have to work with others as much. Like there's a lot of aspects of teamwork I think you can miss out on if you have to be socially distanced, not see the face fully of other people. But I think now I see a lot more of that. Like they're willing to cooperate. They're willing to like step out of their own personal bubble to go do things with other kids. And that's like the one thing that I like hoped they would be able to do over time. So it's nice that in like such a short period of time, it seems like their social skills have like improved quite a bit.
The height of the pandemic brought with it many radical alterations to the ways we live our lives. Some of those alterations are gone, and some are here to stay. Our adaptations to the pandemic permanently altered us as people. For better and worse, our lives will never be the same.
Since I've been away in jail since May 2021, and I recently just got out. I've been out for 2 months. Mm-hmm. It's a big transaction.
Oh, yeah.
The way now people are not worried about no 6 feet. They're not worried about no mask. Then I worry about, well, you know, they should just stay home and not work. And some people are still going to work. Some are not able to go to work for some personal reason they have, which is very fine. I feel like, you know, this was a big step to be able to go and, you know, go play basketball at the park and go enjoy the park, or go to the YMCA and go work out with a whole bunch of people. And that's a big change right there.
I feel like a lot of people who probably not neglected like their self-care, but just maybe didn't think about it that much before, like sort of had to think about it, especially like not just for paying attention to your physical symptoms or whatever, but also like because we spent so much time alone and so much time doing nothing, you sort of have to like finally think about yourself, or like think about just like ways to take care of your life that you might not have thought of as much before. Which, yeah, I think is like, I think it has changed, like not just education with kids and like how we work with them, but like everybody's life.
My public defender was trying to get me out and needed a place to stay, and they found Dismas, and I just wanted to get out, so I was like, sure, I'll take it. Like, and really thankful I found this place. It's like really awesome. It's helped me like really turn things around. Been sober the whole time I've been here, been straight the whole time I've been here, you know, like a law-abiding citizen. Like really trying to give back and like help people, and tried to like right the wrongs. Like not too long ago, I paid restitution for breaking the window, and I wrote like an apology letter, and just like trying to like really do the right thing and make sure I take care of myself so that something like that doesn't happen again. And I think Dismas has been huge in providing me a safe place to make that happen. If it wasn't for COVID, I don't think I would have caught the charges. But as crazy as it sounds, I think going to prison was one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because it got me sober. And I don't really see that happening any other way, because I'm just so stubborn. So like in the AA, NA rooms, they're like, you're either going to end up in prison or you're going to end up dead. And in my case, I was lucky enough to end up in prison. And I've been clean ever since I went in, and I plan to stay clean for the foreseeable future. Yeah, and then also just like the impact of like the pandemic on just general health of people I know. My dad got very sick with COVID, and he almost didn't make it, but thankfully he did. Some people in like my extended family passed away. Or like in my stepmom's family passed away, and that was hard for them. Yeah, so the pandemic is definitely obviously challenging for everybody, but yeah, that's just my story, my what I experienced.
Thank you so much for watching. Before you go, I'd like to thank some people without whom this project never would have happened. First off, thank you to James, Aaron, Abdul Qadir, Rich, Matt, Dave, and Adelaide for sharing your stories with us. There's so much interesting stuff you all had to say that I didn't get to include in the video, and I'd encourage anyone watching to listen to my full interview with each of them if you'd like to hear more. Thank you to Kim and all the other good people at Dismas House for everything you do. Thank you to Thomas, my project partner and a fantastic professor at UVM. Without your guidance and assistance, there's simply no way that any of this would have happened. This project is a successor to another one we worked on together in St. Lucia, where we talked to many people about their experiences with COVID. I've included a link to the first episode of that project in the description, and I'd like to thank Matt, Peyton, Avery, and Nico, who I worked on that project with. I couldn't have asked for a better team, and I learned so much from working with you guys. Thank you to the Consumer Affairs Department of St. Lucia for facilitating that project, and thank you to everyone we interviewed in St. Lucia for inspiring this effort. Finally, thank you again for watching. Take care.